And it's still kind of cheap and you know, things that are ersatz. They're not the real thing, you know. It's like reproductions of things, or you know, the kind of you know, people can't afford a real great crystal chandelier, so they kind of get the next best thing, which is some kind of glass reproduction from a, you know, shop in Chinatown or something. You know, it's
I guess I want to talk about the wallpaper more because I feel like it's one of the things that you're really known for. And you're one of the first artists that I first became aware of as like making wallpaper, I think. I mean, I realize now that Andy Warhol, of course, made the cow wallpaper, and now I feel like wallpaper is everywhere. How did you come into the wallpaper, and do you feel like it was sort of like a breakthrough work for you or something different, or?
I guess I came to it because of it just sort of seemed a natural outgrowth of the way I was painting, and like going back to those when I would stretch up the fabric to sort of approximate wallpaper, and it all, in a way, for me, had to do with like the edges of paintings and where things end and how do you stop them, and the frame of a painting, and just sort of taking that idea and like working out from the edge of the painting, expanding it to be like, well, the edge of the painting is the edge of the architecture, or you know, the architecture becomes the frame that defines where the picture ends. So it was kind of like that, just kind of logically linked for me with the idea of wallpaper. It's like, well, you start the wallpaper where the wall starts and you run it across, like interrupted by doors or whatever else, until you get to the other end of the wall, and then that's it. I think it was partly you know, kind of wanting to outsource certain decision making. You know, it's like, well, I didn't build the building, but if I paper the room, there's certain decisions that are already made that I just have to accept, which was kind of what it was when I was working with the pre-printed fabrics. It was like, I didn't design this, and there are certain things available already in the world, and my choices are kind of limited to those things. So it was kind of about, in a way, limiting choices so that I wasn't freaked out and overwhelmed by the amount of choices and decisions to make, which was kind of what I would get when I would face a blank canvas, and I think why I wasn't a very good painter. It's like, yeah, it could be anything. So then it's like, it just seemed really random. But if I started to like impose some outside limitations on it, it made it kind of manageable.
But couldn't you make wallpaper with any image? Like, isn't it the same thing as a blank canvas?
Yeah, you can. The other thing I really liked about the wallpaper, and still like about it, is that it's kind of paradoxical. It's like, in some ways you can have a really elaborate pattern, but it's kind of a minimal gesture in a way. Like, you make the material and then you paste it up. So it's kind of like this, for me, this kind of weird perversion of monochrome in a way. It's like, instead of like painting a wall green, you like cover it with this pattern. So it kind of, it looks really Baroque maybe, but it's underneath it, it's a very simple, minimal gesture. You know, you have paper and you paste it up till the thing is covered.
And you definitely seem to be inspired by over decadent, or like something very decadent, very, very. It just gives you everything that you want, and then you're not sure if you want it anymore.
In the earlier work, I was kind of like, I wanted to turn up the volume as much as I could, like just to make something kind of as loud as possible. So you like take something that's really like background, usually completely overlooked, like wallpaper, and make a version that's so loud that you can't ignore it. And so I think something that I continue to do is like try to calibrate that, like, you know, make something really loud and then make something like really quiet, and kind of like going back and forth. So I think like the more recent work is like the really quiet stuff, like to make something that's like white on white, maybe there's a little bit of silver, it's all like almost not there. It's got light bulbs that, you know, if you turn off the light bulbs, it almost like completely goes away.
Do you feel maybe you don't have to scream anymore because people have started to notice your work?
not, I don't mean it to be, it's not like about getting attention for myself. It was about like getting attention for these things that people kind of just overlook all the time. I mean, I don't want to scream all the time.
Yeah, no, and
Actually,
when I mean like people looking at your work, I definitely feel like you mean you want people to look at the wallpaper. You don't want people to look at you. Like I definitely.
I want people to look at the wallpaper and think about the wallpaper that they grew up with, that, you know, maybe they never paid too much attention to, or aspects of their, you know, environment, or that maybe they never considered the importance of it, or
You're kind of like in an enviable place in your career. You're living off the sale of your art, and you're making your art all the time. How does that feel?
I mean, I still teach, and I still, you know, it's not like all from sales and everything, but it definitely changes things in a way, you know. Sometimes, like I spend a lot of time doing administrative work, which kind of,
Like you're like the business owner now?
yeah, it's like you start to have like a different relationship to your work when, like before it would be like, well, I want to make this thing, I really want to make it, and I just got to get the money together somehow, and nobody's going to buy it. So if I want to do it, I just got to fund it myself somehow. And so there was the only kind of business aspect to it was like, well, how am I going to get a grant, or how am I going to, you know, work a job to like get the money to like pay for this thing. It becomes different when people do start to want things, because then you get the pressure of like, you know, make more of those, because those things are really moving. You know, those are flying off the shelves, and don't make this other thing because, like, you know, it's gonna be hard to sell, or nobody's gonna want it. And I'm trying not to like, trying not to be a whore.
Well, it seems like that'd be a very hard thing to do, because I know if I made something and somebody wanted 90 of them, I'd probably be very tempted to make 90 of them.
Well, I think it's one of the things that, you know, if people start to want to push me towards the design world, or like what I do as belonging to the design world as opposed to the art world, I think the thing for me that makes a big difference is like, I'm interested in making like maybe a thing and then maybe a couple variations of it to like see it as a real object, and then I'm kind of like not so interested in it anymore. I'm not interested in putting things into like mass production, or and then I'm kind of ready to move on to the next thing. I think people maybe have a fantasy of what it's like just to like do your own work, and it maybe isn't for everybody, because there are times when I kind of wish like, oh, maybe I should just like be a bartender and have my art be kind of like my weird little hobby that I indulge, as opposed to like.
I'm sure there's a lot of heartache in that sort of life too.
Yeah.
But I think, I mean, the way I see it is sort of like, and I think recently with all the look at Andy Warhol, it's becoming more and more apparent how very much like a business a lot of art can become, and how very much once the demand is bigger, that the supply has to get a little bit bigger if you're to sustain like making art and pleasing. You have an audience who's interested in you now.
I think it's hard to like, you want to like maintain the integrity of your work. At the same time, you want to like pay your bills and be able to make more things. So it's kind of like, you know, trying to balance that.